Well, thanks so much for joining us today. It's great that you can be with us. We're talking about anxiety today. I am so excited to have Dr. Katherine Funk with us. She is a good friend. She works with my wife, Alexa. She is just a fantastic person. I hear all the time, Alexa tells me what a great friend Kat is and just what a blessing she is to her. And I'm just thankful for you so much. Katherine has a PhD in school psychology. She is also the director of behavioral health at Carolina Pediatric Therapy, a wonderful place. I know so many of the folks there, and they just do a fantastic job of helping kids just every day. So many kids come there and find the help they need. It's a great group of people. Katherine, thank you so much for being with us here tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's our privilege. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
So you said it. I'm the director of the behavioral health program at the Carolina Pediatric Therapy. And my role is a little bit varied. One piece, I certainly work with families and children in some different ways. One is by doing psychological testing and helping them understand their children a little bit better. And then also I provide therapy to some children there. But I also lead a team of wonderful therapists who have in their heart the desire to kind of serve children and family and really help them reach their full potential. With varied approaches. Well,
thank you so much for what you do. It's just fantastic. You don't always see, I know in my work and in yours where you're serving people, you don't always see instant results. You don't always go home and say, hey, I really made a difference today, but just think about what you're investing in the future of the world by just helping a child where they're at. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's incredible. I feel very lucky to be in the role that I'm in.
Oh, yeah. You're making a difference. We appreciate you so much. Thanks for being here again. We're talking about anxiety. It's an issue that we all deal with. It's an issue that people face on a regular basis. That's a pretty common issue for folks, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we all have anxiety. It is something that we all are born with. It is actually something that helps us be alive and be successful. But then certainly there are times where anxiety can get a little bit, how do I say it, out of control, right? It kind of spirals and can get a little bit more difficult to understand and to manage and can interfere. For kids is a very common disorder, a very common concern, and then certainly through adolescents and adults it becomes even more common.
So it's a good thing to be anxious and a natural thing within us to be anxious when danger is approaching.
Absolutely.
But that sense can get out of control and actually begin to hurt us.
Yes.
Yeah. And it does for so many people. What is it like in the current situation? We're in quarantine now. We've been there for about a month. Are you seeing and experiencing some heightened levels of that, or is it more prevalent right now in our age?
Absolutely. I think in such an understandable way, we are in an experience that for a lot of us, if not most of us or all of us, we've never really experienced before. And what our usual day-to-day routines and life has completely shifted. And with change, stress always can come. But certainly with change where there is an unknown of what the future looks like, that can completely increase fears and worries for everyone.
I was in the grocery store this week, kind of the only place we can go now to the grocery store. It's my relief and my break. I'm looking for excuses to go to the grocery store now. But I saw Time Magazine had a special issue there, and it was entitled The Age of Anxiety. Does it seem like this time period in general that we live in is just, are we so busy? Are we moving so fast? Do we have so much vying for our attention now that we're more anxious, do you think?
Right. Andy, that's such a good question. And it's one I always, become very curious about, because I think on one hand, it's very possible. We have so much more access to everyday information at every minute at our fingertips, that it can be really hard to filter out just the information that comes in. And then on the same hand, or on the other hand, I should say, it's this curiosity I have of, we have always had anxiety, and is it possibly that there is just an increased awareness and acceptance to be able to talk about it, that maybe now we are better at recognizing what is anxiety, where previously it maybe wasn't something that was acceptable to talk about or to share. And so I think it's a mixed bag for me. I'm curious in both ways, and I imagine that both pieces are parts of that puzzle.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's good that we're able to talk about it more and be aware of
Absolutely.
it rather than just hiding it and
Yes.
suffering in silence. Are there different types, Catherine, of different types of anxiety?
Yes, so there's a lot of different types of anxiety. There's something called generalized anxiety disorder, which is kind of this experience where there can be lots of different worries or fears that can cause challenges for individuals to function on a daily basis. There can be things like separation anxiety, which oftentimes we can see in children who struggle with separating from caregivers and managing their own fears, being away from those who typically provide them with care. There can be specific phobias or obsessions. There can be panic disorder, social anxiety. Lots of different types of anxiety can be present.
Yeah. What it happened to me, and I spoke about it a little bit on Sunday several years ago. I had a panic attack, and I had no idea how to deal with that. Can you describe for the folks what people who are going through that actually feel like? Because I imagine there are people listening who have had panic attacks and just don't know what that is.
Yeah, I imagine, Andy, that you probably could do an even better job than I at describing what that experience is like. I might start, but certainly jump in and expand, because I do think it can be so empowering for others to hear from individuals who have experienced it. So, with panic attacks, it is really the experience of physical symptoms. That's what it feels like for individuals who have panic attacks. So it can be heart racing, it can be shortness of breath. It can really feel like there is a medical emergency happening that really oftentimes drives individuals to go to the emergency room to see what could be happening in their body when it's really anxiety.
It happened to me, the last one I had, calm day, wonderful time. I was going out with some friends. We were going out to a restaurant. Everything's good. I'm not really stressing over anything. Not a hard day. Just going along. We walk into the restaurant, sit down at the table, and all of a sudden, I feel like I'm about to die. And I have no idea why. My heart begins to race. I just got up, excused myself, went to the restroom. I looked at myself in the mirror, and sweat is just pouring. My hair's wet. And I thought, I'm just going to die right here. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it had happened before, and I had realized that's what this is. Somebody had told me, this is a panic attack. I talked to a doctor, I talked to a friend, and I think there's power in just recognizing this is what this is.
Yes.
I'm not really dying here.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I think the most powerful piece of treating anxiety is that the increase in awareness of what anxiety is, the education that can come with it, because then individuals feel so empowered of they know what's happening, they understand it in a different way, and sometimes I think when you have the knowledge and the understanding, then you're ready to take action in a different way versus when you don't know and you don't understand.
Well, if I'd had no idea, I would have gone straight to the emergency room, and would probably been the wise thing to do, not knowing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I guess anxiety is different for different people as well. It's hard to really label it.
Sure. Yeah. So, there are certainly common symptoms that we hear about and that helps guide treatment. It's certainly, there are things that can be common for anxiety, but ultimately I think it can be very individual for each person with how it's presenting for them, with what they're experiencing, and then certainly how it interferes with their daily life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think there's value in just listing our fears?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it can be so powerful to take time to just journal, and to kind of get those fears and worries out of your mind. Sometimes I think we don't even recognize how much space they take up or how much time in our day they take away from us, right? That those worried thoughts steal from our time. But if you put it out in a journal or you document it in your phone or whatever feels natural, I think that can be so powerful in just getting it out of your own mind space and putting it someplace else. And then also gives you the opportunity to reflect on those worries and possibly challenge them, see how powerful they are and what evidence do you have that might indicate that those worries are wrong.
So just running away from them or trying to bury them somewhere is not likely to help.
No. I think that is a very normal response that we initially feel when we have something that is scary and that is stressful, is to avoid it. But ultimately what ends up happening is that creates a stronger anxiety around that situation or that fear because you're not able to face it. So typically I always think the hardest part of it is taking that first step. But ultimately once you take that first step, you allow yourself to get stronger and recognize that you are so capable of managing that anxiety just with the right tools.
I knew I just struggle just feeling like as a father, as a pastor, as a man, I guess, I'm supposed to have it all together. I'm supposed to be strong, and it was always hard for me to admit a weakness. I just wanted to, suck it up, as they say, and man up on it, as people say and tell you to do, and that never worked for me. I had to admit, I need help, and I got that help. Awesome. I used the word normal earlier in the conversation. You said you don't like the word normal.
I struggle with
or
the
you
word
struggle with the word
I
normal.
struggle with the word normal. Yes.
Let's talk about that.
Well,
What's the issue with the word normal? How is that tough?
What is normal, right? I don't quite completely understand how we identify what goes into normal and what goes into not normal. There's just too many unique differences that we all have. And I also think, I feel that can be very limiting when you start to talk about what's normal, because ultimately people start to evaluate, well, then where do I fit? If I don't have all of the boxes checked off for what's considered normal, well, then what am I, right? And I'm just not sure we could fit every single box in for what is normal, because there's a lot that is normal.
Yeah. It's normal to struggle with this.
Absolutely.
It's normal to have struggles. It's normal to have weaknesses. I'm using the word again. It's common to us all, at least.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, and I think that's the piece of it too, is that I don't know an individual who doesn't have weaknesses. I don't know an individual who doesn't have struggles, and I don't know that I would trust one if I met one. It's just, if you think about it, it's just.
What would your reaction be if you met someone trying to act like they didn't? I mean, if it's me, if I see a person who's trying to project that they don't have any weaknesses, I immediately know better.
Sure.
And then I don't trust that person.
Yeah. I think, I don't know how to respond to what would my reaction be. I would probably take them for what they're providing, and then hope that at some point they would feel comfortable enough to say, something that's hard for me is this, because I certainly find comfort in talking about those moments, because there's a lot of things that are hard for me, right? And a lot of challenges that I have. But
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. We talked, I mentioned a scripture to you that I used on Sunday. We talked about that yesterday a little bit. Don't worry about anything, but instead pray about everything. And I love the conversation we had about that. You said it first, that first part of that landed on you. Could you describe how that happened and how our conversation developed there?
I think I was very quiet right when you said it, because I initially didn't know how to respond, right? I was thinking, oh oh my goodness, what if people only hear that first part of don't worry about anything, right? I think that is such a great example of something that commonly we hear. People have such great intentions to say, don't worry about it, or, there's nothing to worry about, or things are going to be fine. And ultimately, even though that's coming from such a place of care and heart and good intention, it can feel so invalidating, right, to hear, don't worry about it, because it's saying what you're telling me is something that's causing you stress is not something that should, right? But then when we talked it out more and we talked about the language of instead, and then I felt much more comfortable of this idea of, so really there's this opportunity to reframe it, right? It's
Yes.
not that you are not supposed to worry, but instead, what do you do with those worries and how do you handle those? And that's when I found much more comfort in discussing that.
What I landed on after that conversation, in fact, you will have heard me say this Sunday, and I have to tell you, this is my source right here. This
No
helped
pressure.
me. You helped me already for Sunday. I thought you can't do the first part without the second. You can't just stop. Any habit, I try to tell people, if you're in a habit, you should not focus, this is me, just on stopping. You have to reframe.
Yes.
You have to, the Bible even says, overcome evil with good. Overcome something you don't want in your life with something you do. Reframe it and take it a different direction.
Yeah.
That really helped me to hear you say that.
Well, absolutely. It gets really hard to tell your brain to stop working, right? You can't just say, don't think about that. It's not how our brains work. But instead, what do you do with that? How do you take it and what can you replace it with, right?
Right.
Those are the pieces. And I like that you're talking about habits too. It's really hard to just stop doing something. Typically, I always like to talk about, well, what can you do instead? Or some other options, to just get your brain even thinking that there's other possibilities.
One of the things I've heard a lot is that you can get help for anxiety. Is this a treatable thing? When people come in for help, what's I don't know if I want to use the word success rate, but what do you see when people actually come for help?
I see such success. I love working with individuals who have anxiety because I get so excited for the ability that they will have to just enjoy the life that they want to live, and because I am so hopeful, because my experience and because what research says is that is extremely treatable. In a sense, it's not that in seeking treatment, you take away all fears, right? It's very normal. It's very common. We have fears. That is an okay thing. But ultimately, it just gives you a skill set on how to better manage those fears, on how to tackle those fears when they come up. And so I always get really excited to work with individuals who have anxiety because ultimately, I know that they are just going to be able to unlock their capabilities to an even higher level, right? Of just learning how to better manage the challenges that they have and then enjoy the life that they want to have.
This is a new question I just thought of, so
Okay.
if you need to process this a minute, I love Katherine is such a process. She wants to make sure she says it right, and I see the wheels turning, and I love that so much. It makes me really trust what you say. It really does. That's awesome. Is it different with children? Are there differences that you see in dealing with children?
That is a really great.
I almost want to say they're so young.
Yeah.
What do they have if they're living in a stable home? I understand there are children out there that don't live in stable homes and they have trauma because of that. But if they're in a stable, safe environment, I almost want to say you don't have anything to worry about. You don't have any bills to pay. You don't have anything. But children, we see children all the time really dealing with anxiety. Is there something different about it? I guess I'm trying to say for a parent dealing with their child that's really struggling with anxiety, is there something we could say to them?
Well, I think it goes back to you really want to let them know that you hear them when they say they have fears and they have worries. And you want them to know that it's okay to talk about those things, right? To really steer clear of that reassurance, that desire to reassure. Don't worry, everything's going to be okay. Even though as parents, I think that's what we get pulled to do, because we don't want our children to have any sort of discomfort. But ultimately, it's so important for kids to know that this is an okay feeling to have. It's a very natural thing to feel, and not to feel like you have to run with it, but ultimately to share that with someone else and figure out what can we do to help you feel that you can be more powerful than those fears or those worries. And my passion about working with kids comes from this knowledge that I have that kids are so resilient. They really are. In fact, I would say that all individuals are resilient, but kids are impeccably resilient in that their brains are still forming at every moment. And so there is just such hope, I think, with kids that, yes, worries happen, and it is very common for kids to struggle with anxiety. They have worries about school, they have worries about performance, they have worries about expectations, they have worries about what's going to happen to the people they love, grandparents, parents. All of those things are very real and normal, right? If we're going to keep going back to that word, right?
I've got you saying it now.
You do, but I'm trying to say it in the right sense of everything is normal.
Sense. Yes.
Everything is normal, and so we want to really highlight that is okay and that we hear them. And so what are we going to do with that next?
What they're experiencing is reality.
Absolutely.
And it's okay to walk through that.
Absolutely.
I tend to want to, and this is a mistake that I've made many times, is I want to help people fix things.
Oh, right.
So I want to jump right into the solution. And so if a person sits with me and is just really struggling with something and they pour out their heart, I have learned that my nature is to, okay, I get it. Now I'm going to give you 3 steps to take.
Yes,
If you'll just try these 3 things, it's going to be okay. Now, we're done, and you just go do this. What I have learned is that sometimes people just need, they need somebody to say, I get it, and this really stinks.
Yes, absolutely. So I think what you are saying is also a very natural tendency for a lot of us, right? It is really hard to sit with discomfort. It is really hard to sit with a space where someone is hurting. Those things are very real. And I think what we do with really good intentions is we want to relieve that person from the pain that they're feeling. We want to take that away. We want to push them into this space where they will feel relief from that. And so we try to solve that problem. And I think that comes with such good intentions, but ultimately it might be too fast. The person might not be ready yet, or it could feel like they're not being heard, because ultimately you might be trying to solve a problem when that's not what they were trying to say to you. That wasn't the problem they were wanting to solve. It's actually this. So it's so important to be able to create a space to just say, I hear that. And of course what you're saying would be scary to think about. And that's completely understandable that you would feel that way. And to really make sure that you can hold that space and be in that space for a little bit before you move to the next spot. And I would even argue with moving to the next spot to give them choices of where you go next. Would it be helpful if we thought about what would make you feel better, or would it be helpful if I gave you a couple ideas of what I'm thinking? Just kind of going into giving control. That's what we want, right? We want, when we feel like we have a sense of control, it feels much safer versus going into a place where we didn't necessarily have control into going into that.
I learned this through marriage a lot. And Alexa's here, so she's looking over my shoulder. So she would say this is true. Exactly. There were times early on, and I probably still do this, she would come to me really hurting over something, and I would jump in with, oh, it'll be okay. And I didn't realize, even in saying that, I was minimizing her pain, and it's going to be okay. I got this, and I've got the solution. And she didn't want a solution. She really needed me to connect with that pain she was going through and feel it with her.
Yes.
And that's what I see people looking, and that's been a long journey for me to learn that.
Oh, well, it's hard, right?
It
Because
is.
ultimately it's hard to sit in that space with her when she's not feeling comfortable. You don't want her to feel that way, and so that's when I get to this place of it's completely understandable that we all do that. And yet it is such a big piece of learning of how to be able to say, I can sit with you in this moment, and I can be present with you in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear that that's happening, and I'm so sorry that that's happening.
Yeah. Wow. This is great. It's all been so helpful, and I think our audience is really going to benefit from this. Think about, and I'm thinking now of the number of people that will watch this and be with us here today.
No pressure.
What's that?
I said no pressure.
No pressure at all. A couple thousand people
Yeah, right.
watching. That's okay. Yeah. There are going to be parents out there who don't know where next week's paycheck is coming from.
Yeah.
There are business owners out there who are shut down, and they've got tens, hundreds of employees that are dependent on them, and they don't know if business is going to be going on. There are people out there, I've experienced this. Have you experienced it? Every time you cough, you think, oh, is that the coronavirus? Or you sneeze, or somebody does at the grocery store. And they're really, it's a real anxiety. If you're any type of hypochondriac, that type of thing, you're feeling that now. There are a lot of people out there right now who are struggling with anxiety right now. Is there just something you would say to them today what would you say to them that can help?
That is a great question. I would probably talk too much.
It's
And
okay.
what I would say, I would say you're not alone. I think that, everything you're saying, I'm sitting here nodding my head and then thinking of 3 other things that, might be things to worry about. I think that you're not alone in feeling that worry and feeling those fears. In a sense, that is something that brings me a lot of hope. That we really are all in this together. And so I think that would be the first big thing I would want to say.
Yeah.
Um,
That's good.
yeah.
So few people, though, reach out for the help that they need.
Right.
And you said this earlier in conversation, that anxiety doesn't have to get to a level that it's really interfering with your life.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if it does, the urgency would be there in a greater way, I think, to get help. But nobody has to live alone and struggle with anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Yet so few people actually seek out help.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the reasons are for that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Andy. And we talked about it a little bit earlier. I think that there are a lot of challenges that can come in the way of accessing care. It can be something, wondering if what you have is a big enough reason why you need treatment, or thinking that you should just be able to handle it on your own. It could be, how do you squeeze another appointment in your week? How do you, where are you going to find the time to do that? Where are you going to find the money to squeeze an appointment in, or to make another commitment financially to something during a time when finances are uncertain? So I think there can be so many different barriers that can come into place. But ultimately, something that you said that I think is really important to think about is that ultimately, we all deserve and we all can benefit from really taking time to take care of ourselves, in the sense of learning the skills that would allow us to feel some relief from stress and from anxiety. And I really think treatment can offer that. And I don't think you have to wait for it to get to a certain point, but ultimately think about the idea of, at any point that you access it, it's going to catapult you into a different space where you will feel relief faster, you will feel support sooner, and find that hope of being able to tackle the fears and the worries on your own when they start to come up.
That's great. If a person right now at home cannot see themselves getting professional help? Can they talk to a friend? A pastor, a friend. Just,
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's so many different things that you can do at home on a day-to-day basis that can cause or provide some relief to anxiety and fears. I think one big piece that can be really impactful is allowing yourself to be present, and reaching out for support, right? So when I think about being present, I think about taking a walk outside in nature. I think about exercising, meditating, thinking about a gratitude journal, taking time to really think about what you're grateful for. But then the piece that you highlight, which I think is my second big recommendation, is just reaching out to someone else and talking about the worries and the concerns that you have. It doesn't have to necessarily be someone who is in a professional space, but just recognizing you don't have to be alone in it, and it's okay to talk about.
it's incredible. Well, this has been awesome. It's helped me. I feel like I'm getting free therapy now in several interviews. This has been incredible. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
What a
Thank you for
tremendous
having me.
heart you have, and a genuine love for people, and that's just wonderful to see. I'm glad you're in this community making a difference, and you are doing that. So thank you so much. Thank you for being with us today. Just so glad you joined us here. Hope this helps you. Thanks so much.